Chapter 1. The Dance of Velvet and Vows.
They met under the vaulted ceilings of the Citadel Hall, where chandeliers hung like captured constellations and every whispered promise was a weapon waiting to strike. Selene Veylor moved like smoke through the crowd, her gown a shade darker than morning. She wore no jewels, she was the jewel, the shimmering proof that House Veylor had survived the quiet purge when so many others had burned. Survival had a cost. She carried it like a blade hidden in velvet, honed sharper with every breath she took. Around her, courtiers laughed too loudly, their mirth thin and brittle, their lips stained with lies. Every smile was a trap. Every glance a weighing of worth. Eyes followed her like hounds. Some with envy, others with suspicion. She caught glimpses of stewards in dark crimson livery, bearing the sigil of the Dominion Triumvirate, a triskelion of iron thorns. Watching. Weighing. The Dominion rules everything, the court, the church, the houses, and it rules by fear, not truth. And my father serves them. So does every house that still smiles at their table. And among the courtiers, Selene spotted Lady Riona Thorne. Lady Riona Thorne stood like a promise no one could afford to keep, all gold and grace, with a mind sharp enough to cut silk mid-fall. She smiled like a saint, whispered like a spy, and watched Selene not with hatred, but with calculation. Riona did not destroy enemies, she made them destroy themselves. Her gaze brushed over Selene, lingering a heartbeat too long. Her lips curved in a smile that held no warmth, a promise, perhaps. Or a threat. Selene inclined her head in perfect civility and moved on, heart steady, smile unbroken. "You look stunning, my dear," Riona said as Selene passed. Selene smiled, flawless, empty, practiced, and did not stop walking. And across the room, leaning with idle arrogance against a marble pillar, was young Lord Cassian Merrow. Cassian, the enemy. The temptation she could not afford. The one man her house had sworn to destroy. His gaze found hers through the press of lords and ladies, pinning her in place more surely than any blade. He lifted his glass in a mocking salute, the tilt of it lazy, almost insolent. He was not supposed to be here, his family had been stripped of lands, titles, and dignity after the failed rebellion. Cassian was the last heir of his house since the silent purge claimed his father's life. His presence tonight was an act of open defiance. A dare, flung like a gauntlet at the feet of the court. Selene's blood hummed with warning. If her father, or even worse, the Minister of Shadows saw her looking, if any of them caught even the faintest quickening of her heartbeat, it would be over. Treason. Death. Not just hers, but House Veylor's final fall. And yet, when Cassian pushed away from the pillar and began threading his way through the golden throng toward her, Selene found she could not move. Could not breathe. Could not look away. They met not in words, but in the shared silence of those who understood, this would ruin them. This would damn them. And still, when Cassian bowed low and offered his gloved hand, Selene placed hers atop it without hesitation. The orchestra shifted into a slower cadence, a waltz built not for joy but for spectacle. Selene felt the weight of 100 gazes pivot toward them as they took the floor, spinning beneath the chandelier's cruel, unblinking eyes. Her heart hammered. At the edge of the hall, she caught Riona again, murmuring behind a silk fan with another courtier. Their gazes slid to Selene, sharp as knives. "You shouldn't be here," she murmured as Cassian drew her into a slow turn, their bodies too close, their hands too sure. Cassian smiled, a wolf's smile polished to courtly charm, but in his eyes, something raw flickered, exhaustion, grief, a hollow place not even arrogance could mask. "Neither should you. I haven't betrayed anyone," she said softly, her pulse thudding. "No," he agreed. "You're just the one destined to betray yourself." The words cut deeper than they should have. Selene set her jaw, her steps sharp and flawless, keeping time even as her thoughts frayed. Around them, the court whispered. The scent of wine and wax and ambition pressed close. Stewards moved like dark currents at the room's edge. Eyes narrowed. Daggers were drawn, some no longer just in metaphor. "You've caused a scandal just by showing your face. Your presence alone is a crime now." The Lord's triumvirate will demand blood. Let them demand, Cassian said, his voice low, meant for her ears alone. They can have my blood, when they earn it. And mine? She asked, before she could stop herself. For a heartbeat, Cassian's hand tightened fractionally at her waist. His gaze burned into hers with something far more dangerous than defiance, something closer to devotion. Recognition of the same breaking inside her. No, he said. Yours is the one thing I will not give them. The dance ended with a flourish. The court applauded, some too eagerly, some with knives glinting behind their smiles. Selene curtsied, Cassian bowed. For the span of a breath, she thought they might part ways, play their roles, pretend none of it had happened. Then a hand brushed her sleeve, discreet, almost accidental. Cassian slipped a folded scrap of parchment into her palm. Midnight. The Winter Gallery. The handwriting was unmistakable, and the parchment still held the scent of him. Selene barely blinked as she tucked it into the folds of her gown, expression serene. To refuse would be safe. Wise. Loyal. She was Veylor. Daughter of legacy. Servant of power. Not a fool. And yet, as she stepped away into the swirling sea of politics and poison, Selene already knew she would go.
The Winter Gallery.
The bells of the inner court tolled midnight, each chime heavy as a sealed fate. Selene moved like a shadow through the abandoned halls of the citadel, her steps soundless against the marble. Her gown was gone, traded for a cloak the color of deep wine, the hood drawn low over her hair. No attendants. No guards. No alibis. Every step carved the path of her own undoing. If anyone saw her wandering alone at this hour, the rumors would write themselves before dawn, and the executioners would not lag far behind. The Winter Gallery was the oldest part of the palace, left untouched by rebuilding after the purge. Here, the stones still bore the scars of ancient sieges, murals faded into ghosts, histories the Dominion would rather erase than honor. A cold draft gusted through the cracked mosaics, carrying the faint scent of ash. Selene paused before a faded fresco, a crowned figure standing defiant against a burning sky. Strange sigils wreathed the figure's brow, half erased, half forgotten. Old blood. Old vows. Something in her chest ached. Something ancestral and dangerous? The sound of armor rattling in the distance shook her loose from the moment. She pressed deeper into the shadows, heart hammering against her ribs. Tonight, I choose my ruin, she thought grimly. Not theirs. Not my father's. She stepped inside. Cassian was already waiting. He leaned against the far wall, half swallowed by the gloom. Only the silver embroidery at his collar caught the moonlight. He looked as he always had, reckless, self-assured, but Selene could see it now, the careful set of his shoulders, the tension radiating from him, like a man walking a blade's edge. You came, he said. You left me no choice, she answered, though both of them knew it was a lie. A flicker of a smile crossed his lips, quick, bitter. There's always a choice. Selene said nothing. In the Dominion's court, choices were illusions, prettied up in silk, sharpened into knives. She moved deeper into the gallery, into danger. Closer to him. You should have stayed gone, she said. The Dominion declared your house forfeit. Your lands. Your titles. Your name. You are nothing now. And yet, Cassian said, pushing off the wall, here I stand. And here you are. Their eyes locked, and Selene hated how easily the silence between them filled not with fear, but with understanding. You think this changes anything? She asked. I think it changes everything, he said. I think you and I are already lost, Selene. The only question left is how we fall. For a moment, the world outside the Winter Gallery ceased to exist. No Dominion. No houses. No loyalties but the ones they made themselves. Selene reached up and pulled down her hood. The moonlight painted her hair silver. Cassian drew in a sharp breath, almost imperceptible. You think you can survive this court without a house to shield you? She said, voice cutting. Without blood ties to barter, without a sigil to swear by? I don't need a house, Cassian said. He took a step closer, and Selene did not retreat. I need an ally. And you think I would ever ally with you? Cassian smiled, slow and dangerous. But beneath it, Selene caught it, the flash of uncertainty. Of need. A man gambling everything he had left. You already have, he said. Before Selene could answer, before she could summon the anger she should feel, Cassian reached out and brushed his fingers lightly against hers. The touch was nothing. And yet it shattered something inside her. Selene closed her eyes, just for a heartbeat, and let herself imagine it, a world without sigils or blood debts. A world where she could want what she wanted without drowning in guilt and ruin. She opened her eyes. Cassian was still there, waiting, not demanding, not forcing. Simply waiting for her to choose. This is madness, she thought. This is death. And then, this is freedom. I have secrets, Cassian said, voice low. Information your father would kill to possess. Information that could tear the Dominion apart. I have names, Selene. Dates. Letters signed in your father's own hand. Proof of the quiet purge, of nobles, soldiers, even children, erased without trial and buried without record. The Dominion feeds on silence, but I've stolen its voice. He leaned closer, eyes flickering with a dangerous fire. Your house wasn't spared. Some of those names. They wore your colors before they vanished. Selene's heart kicked painfully against her ribs. Meet with me, Cassian said. No one has to know. Help me, Selene. Help yourself. It was suicide. It was treason. It was the first breath of a future she dared not dream. Her hand trembled, just once. When? She whispered. Cassian smiled, a real smile this time, unguarded, broken, radiant. I'll find you, he said. And before the weight of what she had agreed to could crush her, he was gone, swallowed by the shadows. Selene remained standing in the ruins of a forgotten gallery, the threads of her future slipping from her fingers like a tapestry come undone. There is always a choice, she thought. And tonight, I have chosen mine.
The Dance of Blade and Oath.
Obsidian Hold, the seat of House Veylor, juts from the cliffside like a blade in the dark, severe, angular, and cold as judgment. Its halls, carved from black stone veined with fire gold, seem built not to shelter but to command obedience. Selene lunged across the polished marble, her practiced sword flashing. Sweat slicked her back beneath the high-collared tunic, each step measured, each strike deliberate. Across from her, Master Corlin moved like a wraith in grey, his blade tapping aside her attack with effortless disdain. Again, Corlin barked. And this time, less hesitation. Selene ground her teeth and struck anew, the sharp crack of steel echoing between the high walls. Her muscles burned, each breath felt like swallowing fire. Above them, carved balconies loomed, and she knew unseen courtiers watched, weighing her worth as surely as any duel. Corlin parried easily, pressing her back. A Veylor blade defends legacy, girl. Not foolish passions. Cassian's mocking bow at the ball flashed behind her eyes. Her grip wavered. Her strike faltered. Corlin caught her off balance, knocking her weapon wide. Sweat stung Selene's eyes. Her lungs ached for air. He stepped close, his voice dropping to a cold whisper. If you let your heart guide your hand, the court will bleed you dry before the first blow lands. Selene wrenched free, cheeks burning with more than exertion. You are the future of House Veylor, Corlin said. You are the blade in velvet. Not some trembling girl led by sentiment. Emotion is a weakness we can't afford, not here. Not now. He circled her again, forcing her to move, to guard, to sweat and strain until every blow came from instinct, not feeling. A blade with a heart, he sneered, is a blade that rusts. Selene drove forward, teeth bared, forcing him back for the first time. Corlin's grin was razor thin. Then it softened, just barely. Good, he said. Now show them what Veylor steel remembers. The hollow spire, once the seat of House Merrow, rises like a broken crown over drowned ruins, elegant in decay, its spires cracked but unbowed. When the quiet purge erased his bloodline, Cassian cast off his name. Merrow became his mask in the ashes, a name chosen, not inherited. Half a city away, in the blackened skeleton of a once grand estate, Cassian Merrow drove his sword hard against his sparring partners, the force of it jarring up through his bones. Steel shrieked in protest as old Master Darren twisted, catching the blow and throwing it wide with effortless precision. Dust and broken mortar crumbled beneath their boots. "You're thinking again," Darren snapped. His voice was dry gravel. His white hair hung loose over his brow, and his tunic was scorched and threadbare, as if it too had survived the purge. Cassian didn't answer. He paced in a slow circle, boots grinding over shattered flagstone. The winter chill had numbed his fingers, but the burn in his shoulders and thighs was sharp and real. Each breath misted, shallow and fast. "Hard not to think," he muttered finally, "when half the city wants you dead." Darren tilted his head. "And the other half?" Cassian hesitated. A flicker of memory, Selene's hand in his, the weight of the court stairs, the silent promise in her eyes, stabbed through him. "Gone," he said. "Dead already. They just don't know it." Darren grunted. "Now you're learning." He lunged forward without warning. Cassian barely got his blade up in time to block. The clash rang through the courtyard like a bell tolling for ghosts. They fought in tight, brutal exchanges, blades flashing beneath the open sky. The ruins of Merrow Hall loomed around them, shattered arches, blackened windows, ivy curling through broken stone like veins through old bone. Once it had been proud. Now it was ash and memory. "Your house is gone," Darren barked between strikes. "Your father's bones were taken with the trash. Your name, nothing but a whisper in rooms you'll never enter again." Cassian's guard broke. Darren knocked his sword aside, stepped in, and struck him hard across the jaw with the hilt. Cassian staggered, breath ragged, mouth filling with the taste of iron. "And you," Darren said, closing in, "still think fury is enough to keep you standing. I don't want their titles." Cassian spat blood, lifted his blade again. "Then what do you want?" He feinted left, twisted his hips, and slashed right, forcing Darren back a pace, then two. He pressed forward, eyes blazing. Darren struck 3 times, each blow a blur. "Dead, dead, and dead. Gods, concentrate. I want them to choke," Cassian hissed. "On every lie they fed us. On the purge. On the silence. On the names they erased. I want the dominion to burn." For a breath, Darren didn't move. Then he smiled, barely a ghost of one. "Good." He raised his sword. But anger without control is just noise. Cassian rushed in, too fast, too wild. His swings were powerful but undisciplined, driven by frustration instead of form. Darren blocked one, ducked the next, then swept his leg under Cassian's. The younger man hit the ground hard, the air blasted from his lungs. "Again," Darren said flatly. Cassian lay still for a moment, staring up at the colorless sky through the broken ceiling beams. His chest rose and fell in ragged rhythm. "Is that your grand plan?" Darren asked after a beat. "To burn fast, to die spectacularly, and what? Hope someone tells your story afterward." Cassian rolled onto one elbow, glaring. "It's better than rotting in silence." Darren studied him. Something colder settled in his eyes, not cruelty, but the weight of survival. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe it's just another way to lose." He offered no hand to help Cassian up. Only words. "Whatever you're planning, it's not enough to hate them. You have to want something more than revenge. You have to want yourself alive." Cassian didn't answer. He stood slowly, wiping his mouth with the back of his sleeve. Darren gave him one last look, measuring, cautious. "You're not your father." A pause. "That's not a warning. It's a chance." He turned, walking toward the edge of the courtyard. "Get stronger, Cassian. Or don't waste your breath being clever. Breaking things is easy. Building them, that takes blood." Cassian stood alone in the cold, broken estate. His fingers curled around the hilt of his sword. This wasn't about dying for a cause. It was about making them remember why they feared his name in the first place. steel rang in Selene's ears as Corlin drove her toward the courtyard's fountain. Legacy, girl, he snapped. Every step you take, every smile you offer, every blade you draw, it is not yours. It is Veylor's. She countered, faster now, each movement flowing with purpose, not anger. Cassian wiped blood from his split lip, raising his blade again under the sagging bones of his family's ruined hall. No banners left to die for, Darren said, circling. Only ghosts whispering in the cracks. Selene locked blades with Corlin, their swords straining between them. And if legacy demands you kneel to monsters? She hissed. Darren barked a short, harsh laugh as Cassian drove him back against a shattered pillar. Then you spit in legacy's eye, Darren said. You survive. Selene pivoted, feeling her tunic cling to her slick skin, muscles screaming for rest she would not grant. Cassian dropped low, sweeping Darren's legs. Dust clouded the air as they crashed to the ground, blades locking. Selene dropped to one knee, panting, as Corlin stepped back, offering no hand. She stared into the rippling surface of the fountain. Her reflection swam back at her, bruised, breathless, unbroken. Across the city, Cassian pressed a bloodied hand against the cracked stone, his reflection broken into 100 jagged pieces. Tonight, they would meet again. 2 blades. 2 legacies. And a choice no blade could defend them from.
An abandoned watchtower.
The city sprawled beneath them, a ruin painted in silver and shadow. Selene stood atop the broken parapet of an abandoned watchtower, the cold night wind tugging at the edges of her cloak. Far below, the lanterns of the lower quarters flickered like dying stars. Above, the heavens stretched vast and pitiless. She should not have come. Yet when the folded scrap of parchment had fallen from her sleeve, another clandestine note slipped by Cassian's unseen hand, she had known she would. Rooftop. 1 hour before dawn. Trust me. And so she had slipped away from the warmth of her house's guarded walls, from duty, from caution, drawn by a thread she dared not name. Her arms still ached from hours of punishing drills, sweat-drenched and relentless beneath the barracks' lanterns. Her knuckles were scraped raw from sparring with Corlin. A dark bruise blossomed just above her hip, where his wooden blade had caught her off balance. She knew from the way Cassian moved, stiff, guarded, that Darren had left his own marks. Theirs were different battles, but the pain they carried was the same. Footsteps echoed on the crumbling stair. Selene turned as Cassian emerged, his cloak battered by the wind, hair tousled by sleep or haste. He moved stiffly, favoring his left side, but his eyes found hers immediately, steady beneath the shadows. There were no masks between them now. No ballrooms, no spying courtiers, no brittle smiles. Only 2 souls balanced on the edge of a blade. He said nothing at first, merely crossed the final distance and stood beside her, his hand brushing hers briefly as he settled. They both winced at the contact, bruised fingers meeting bruised knuckles, and shared a glance, half pain, half grin. For a long moment, they simply looked out over the broken city, letting silence settle like a third companion. It looks different from up here, Selene said at last, her voice low. Smaller. Cassian gave a rough laugh and rotated his shoulder with a wince. Everything does when you're standing above it. Especially after it's tried to kill you all night. Sweat still clung to his hairline, half dried. A faint scratch marked his cheekbone, a souvenir from the hours Darren had carved into him. You should sleep, she said, surprising herself. Cassian smiled, a crooked thing, half real, half defense. Sleep, he echoed. When the Dominion tightens its noose every night. When the houses sharpen their knives and call it loyalty. He exhaled, and it caught slightly, bruised ribs, probably. No. I'd rather remember this, he added, voice softer now. The city before it forgets itself completely. Selene followed his gaze to the horizon, where the first threadbare light of dawn bled into the ash-colored sky. She shifted, feeling the pull in her shoulder where she'd overextended during a parry. It won't forget, she said. Not if we make them remember. The words tasted like iron and resolve. Cassian looked at her then, truly looked, as if memorizing the angles of her face, the tight braid falling loose across her collarbone, the faint sheen of sweat on her brow, the defiance stitched into every inch of her. "You're not like them," he said. Selene's heart thudded painfully against her ribs. "You don't know me," she whispered. "I know enough." The wind stirred the silence between them, heavy with all the things they could not say. Selene turned back to the city, willing her hands to stay steady at her sides. Her fingers still trembled faintly from the strain of gripping a blade too long. Cassian stepped closer, so close she could feel the heat of him against the chill. He smelled of sweat, of steel, of something quiet and warm beneath all the war. "When this ends," he said, "if we survive it." He trailed off. Selene dared to look at him, dared to let herself see the thing burning there in his storm-gray eyes. Hope. Fear. Want. She reached out, a reckless, trembling gesture, and brushed her fingers against the back of his hand. They both flinched at the contact, scraped skin against scraped skin. Cassian caught her hand in his, calloused fingers closing carefully around hers. Neither moved for a breathless eternity. Then, slowly, he lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, a touch so light it might have been a promise, or an apology, or a memory in the making. Selene's breath caught. The world narrowed to the space between them, the heat of his mouth against her bruised skin, the thunder of her own heart. "If we fall," Cassian said against her hand, "I want to remember how this felt." Selene closed her eyes, willing herself to carve this moment into her bones. She stepped closer, until their foreheads brushed, until they breathed the same battered air. For a heartbeat. For a lifetime. There was only them, no houses, no banners, no bloody oaths. Only Selene and Cassian, two bodies sore with training, two blades crossing in the dark. When she pulled away, it was slow, reluctant, the ache in her muscles echoing the ache in her chest. "We can't afford this," she said, voice breaking. Cassian's smile was a ghost. "No. But that doesn't mean we don't deserve it." Selene swallowed the tightness rising in her throat. "We deserve a lot of things," she said. "But we'll take what we can." Cassian squeezed her hand once, just enough to sting. "Go," he said hoarsely. "Before the sun finds us." Selene turned away, forcing her feet to move, forcing herself to leave behind the fragile, dangerous thing they had kindled atop the tower. The city was waking below, cruel, hungry, blind. Selene squared her shoulders against the rising dawn. She would meet it with steel. She would meet it with fire. And deep beneath the armor she wore like skin, she would carry the memory of a hand in hers, a kiss against bruised knuckles, and the knowledge that even in a world built to break them, they had chosen each other.
Velvet and Ash.
The bells of the sanctuary of the divine flame tolled high and hollow across the bruised morning sky. Inside, the great hall shimmered with heat and incense, thick as drowning cloth. Hundreds of candles burned atop gilded altars, their smoke rising like prayers the gods had long since stopped hearing. The noble houses filled the pews in somber procession, silks rustling, armor polished to mirror brightness, faces carved into masks of pious devotion. At the center, in robes of molten gold, stood High Priest Veridin, hands lifted in ritual benediction. He was no soldier. No noble. Yet the weight of his voice could tip courts into obedience or ruin. Veridin held no sword, but the Order of Flame, his inquisitors cloaked in crimson and fire steel, made sure his sermons cut just as deep. "Blessed be the crown," Veridin intoned. "Blessed be the order that keeps the fires of unity alight." Murmured responses rippled through the hall, dutiful as breath. Selene knelt beside her father in the Veylor pew, head bowed, her face a study in serene obedience. Sweat trickled down her spine beneath the high collar of her formal dress. She kept her hands folded tightly, her eyes downcast. Only once did she lift them, a fleeting glance across the marble aisle. There, half shrouded in shadow, stood Cassian Merrow. Once, his house had commanded provinces and tribute. Now he stood among lesser cousins and faded banners, his presence a quiet defiance. Their eyes met, just for a breath. He looked away first. Selene bent her head lower, her pulse a frantic drumbeat under her skin. High Priest Veridin stepped onto the central dais, flanked by Dominion banners. His sermon echoed through the vaulted chamber, warm and venomous. "We are one body," he proclaimed. "One blood. One flame." In the pews, House Karin, sworn lapdogs of the triumvirate, sat resplendent in blood-red velvet. Lord Karin inclined his head with exquisite false humility. Lord Veylor returned the gesture with a measured nod, the barest courtesy required. Near the front, Lady Avern of House Malin, whose fortune rose and fell with every dominion whim, smiled thinly, her jeweled fingers twitching like a spider sensing prey. The air beneath the stained glass dome was thick with 1,000 silent calculations. Marriage offers masked as blessings. Threats wrapped in pleasantries. Deals whispered into embroidered sleeves. The city burned beyond these walls, but here, in the sanctuary, the game endured. The noble youth from House Tarrant stepped forward, cloak trailing behind him like spilled ink. He dropped to one knee before the altar, head bowed low, hands clasped in trembling devotion. The gesture was flawless, precisely measured, reverent without being theatrical. Every house in the hall knew what was at stake. Tarrant's fading fortunes hung on this boy's ability to perform loyalty with conviction. Veridin raised a hand in benediction, his voice smooth and sonorous. "The flame receives the faithful." Behind the kneeling boy, Lord Halaric watched with cold, appraising eyes. Draped in black, gaunt as a crow, he tilted his head ever so slightly toward the Dominion magistrate seated beside him. A look passed between them, quick, wordless, and devastating in its certainty. Selene saw it. She kept her gaze lowered, her posture unchanged, but she noted everything: the angle of Halaric's chin, the magistrate's faint nod, the tightening of a gloved hand on a ceremonial staff. It was a conversation conducted without words, a deal sealed without need for parchment or seal. The boy's kneeling wasn't just piety, it was currency. His house had offered its loyalty like a coin pressed into the palm of power. And power had just accepted it. Selene's fingers curled slightly in her lap. She felt the heat of the candles, the weight of incense pressing against her lungs, and the unbearable stillness of her father's presence beside her. But her thoughts were already moving, quiet, sharp, calculating. Every glance in this hall could shift alliances, bury rivals, or resurrect the forgotten. And here she was, dressed in silk and obedience, watching it unfold like a second skin being shed. She had learned early, in the Dominion's courts, survival came not through proclamation, but through silence. Through the half-smile, the weighted nod, the gesture that said more than speech ever could. Above it all, Veridin's voice rose again. "Obedience is the path. Sacrifice is the price." Selene's throat burned. She kept her gaze fixed on the marble floor. Cassian shifted slightly, enough for the old man beside him, one of the last Merrow retainers, to grunt a warning. Cassian bowed his head again. Not in prayer. In calculation. He watched. Memorized. Faces. Positions. Weaknesses. When the fire came, he would know where to strike. His gaze flicked again to Selene, her pale hair bent beneath candlelight, her posture carved from duty and defiance alike. His hands curled slowly in his lap, fingers closing tight, as if around a sword that wasn't there. Not yet. But soon. On the dais, Veridin lifted the crown of ash, a relic blackened by forgotten wars, worn only during rites of obedience. "May those who stray be cleansed by flame?" The congregation answered, voices hollow, "May the fire remember." Selene's lips moved, but no sound followed. Cassian did not speak at all. Above them, the sanctuary's stained glass saints stared down, blind, their hands bound in chains of light. And beneath that frozen gaze, the great families of the Dominion smiled their false smiles, played their ancient games, and watered the seeds of their own destruction with every breath. The fire was coming. And no blessing would save them.
Chapter 2. Whispers in the Vale.
The bells tolled the morning hour, cold and merciless. Selene moved through the marble corridors of the citadel with a steady gait and a frozen smile, but inside, every step felt like a blade pressed to her throat. The court buzzed like a hive on the verge of swarming. Whispers followed her, not loud enough to accuse, not daring enough to confront. But there were looks. And looks could kill as surely as daggers. Cassian's return had shattered something fragile beneath the court's glittering surface. The Lord's Triumvirate had convened in secret hours after the ball, and already edicts were being drafted. One house, one bloodline, would have to pay for this breach of law. Selene knew the names being whispered. She knew hers was among them. She passed a pair of young courtiers leaning too close together, lips hidden behind fans. One tittered behind her hand and murmured, "She danced with a ghost. Or a wolf. Which is worse?" At the grand stair, a steward in black and crimson intercepted her. His bow was low, but his voice was clipped and urgent. "My lady," he said, eyes respectfully downcast. "You are summoned to the solar chamber." Selene felt her blood turn to ice. The solar chamber was no courtly salon. It was a place of decisions and executions. No one summoned there left unchanged. She gave a slight nod and followed, her gown whispering over ancient stone. "Control your face. Control your fate." The solar chamber was Lord Veylor's true throne. Light poured through a wide court skylight, casting hard lines across black stone and gold. At its center stood a steel war table, ringed with sigil projectors and cold stone chairs, no comfort, only control. Here, Lord Veylor did what the court only whispered of, weighed lives, redrew borders, and decided which names history would forget. The solar chamber was an oven of light and judgment. Golden mosaics glared down from every wall, depicting the Dominion's founding victories, dragons chained, cities burned clean, thrones seized by fire and law. The ceiling domed high above in hammered gold leaf and glass, designed to reflect sunlight from dawn until dusk. No shadows were allowed here, only truth or the illusion of it. It was not a courtroom, not officially. The Triumvirate did not attend such gatherings. Their power moved through quieter channels, ministers, scribes, bloodless rituals. The solar chamber was where nobles were reminded of their place, and given one final chance to hold it. Selene smelled the sharp sting of burning oil beneath the polished marble, laced faintly with something older, blood, dried and scrubbed but never forgotten. Her father, Lord Veylor, stood by the tall window, posture rigid, a statue carved from legacy and expectation. Across the chamber, wrapped in grey velvet that seemed to drink the light, lounged the Minister of Shadows. Her smile curved like a crescent moon over a cup of poison. A third figure lingered near the far wall, a slender man in archivist brown, his ink-stained fingers folded neatly at his waist. Talon Pharaohs, official scribe of the Dominion. His head remained bowed, his eyes never lifting. Selene barely noticed him, then. Later, she would remember his stillness. And the weight of what he heard. She stepped into the center of the chamber and bowed. "You summoned me, my lord," she said, voice steady. "You were seen last night," her father replied, still facing the light. His voice was calm, and somehow that was worse than rage. "Many were seen last night, my lord," she answered carefully. "You danced," said the Minister of Shadows, her voice silk-soaked in venom, "with a traitor." Selene smiled, just enough to be infuriating. "I am a lady. Must I also be cruel to the unfortunate?" Selene straightened, spine rigid as glass. "I danced with a man whose name has been stripped from the ledgers. Is it treason to acknowledge a ghost?" A soft chuckle from the minister, low and knowing. Her eyes never blinked. Lord Veylor finally turned to face his daughter. "You are clever, daughter," he said. "But cleverness is a blade that cuts both ways." His gaze was the color of iron, and twice as forgiving. "You will attend the tribunal this evening," he said. "You will stand before the court and denounce Cassian Merrow. Publicly. Unambiguously." The words dropped like iron into still water. Selene did not let her hands tremble. "As you command. Your will is the tide, my lord, I merely drift with it." "Good." His smile was thin. Humorless. "For the survival of House Veylor." She bowed again, deeper this time, then turned to leave. Behind her, the Minister of Shadows whispered, soft enough that Talon Pharaohs barely needed to raise his quill, "There are no secrets in this palace, my dear. Only debts. Waiting to be collected." Selene walked from the solar chamber with her back straight, her silence absolute. But inside, her resolve cracked like scorched glass. The door closed behind her, and Selene exhaled slowly. A steward brushed past carrying sealed letters, one bearing the black wax of the triumvirate. Further down the corridor, she passed Lady Riona Thorne, who emerged from a side gallery as if by coincidence. Her expression was a work of art, polite surprise, gentle curiosity. But her eyes were knives. "My Lady Veylor," Riona said, all grace and frost. "So early. I do hope your morning council was enlightening." "Of course, my lady." "Do I not look enlightened?" Selene replied, her smile as soft as silk drawn over a blade. "Truth is rarely convenient," she added, voice quiet but steady. "Nor are ghosts," Riona said, her own smile cooling. "And yet they always find ways to linger." Their eyes held for a moment longer than court politeness allowed. Selene moved on without answering. She could feel Riona's gaze like the press of a dagger between her shoulder blades. She returned to her chambers with her smile still intact, barely. Only when the heavy oak doors closed behind her did she allow herself a single, shuddering breath. She tore the pins from her hair and let the cascade fall free. Her fingers trembled. A tribunal. A denunciation. A line she could not uncross. On her writing desk, a package waited. An innocuous leather-bound book, treatises on court etiquette, the sort clerks sent endlessly to remind young nobles of their place. She had not requested it. She opened the cover. Something slipped free. A note, written in Cassian's hand: "The Dominion's chains are gilded, not broken. Meet me. Midnight. Western Spire Archives. You are not alone." Her pulse pounded in her ears. Selene folded the note into her sleeve. Every rational thought screamed at her to burn it. To forget. To live. But rationality had died the moment she placed her hand in his at the ball.
The Spire Archives.
Selene moved like a ghost through the lower corridors of the citadel, cloaked in velvet so dark it drank the light. She wore no perfume. No rings. Not even a pin to mark her house. She was no one tonight, only a shadow among stone. She passed no guards. No servants. But she knew better than to believe herself unseen. In the Dominion, walls had eyes. Paintings whispered. Secrets were currency, and someone was always selling. The Spire Archives loomed above her, long abandoned since the last insurrection. The uppermost level had been sealed for decades, too damaged, too symbolic, too full of ghosts. A reminder. A warning. Not a sanctuary. The door stood ajar, creaking softly in the wind. Too easy, some part of her thought. Too still. She slipped inside. The silence was thick. Moonlight cut through broken windows, painting cracked stone in pale streaks. Moss crept across old banners. A fresco above the hearth showed a crowned figure bound in fire, half flaked away, but not yet erased. Beneath it, barely legible, "Let none outlive the oath." Selene shivered. Cassian stood at the center of the chamber, framed by ruined tapestries and ash. His coat was dusted with powder, his collar torn at one edge. But he stood straight, silver blonde hair tousled by wind, eyes burning in the dark. "You came," he said. "As you knew I would," she answered. He didn't smile. "I wasn't sure." She stepped closer. "They want me to denounce you tonight. At the tribunal." "I know," he said quietly. "It was Riona who brought the petition forward. She's circling you." Selene's pulse stuttered. "Of course she is." Cassian unbuckled a scroll case from his belt and held it out. "This is why I came back." She took it. The leather was cracked, ancient, the seal broken long ago. Inside were folded documents, thick parchment, red-threaded, marked with the faded sigils of old houses, some of them purged. Some she thought extinct. She unfolded one and read aloud: "Disbursement approved for strategic termination, House Varen, House Lyrian, House..." She stopped. Her voice had broken. Another page. A handwritten order, marked with a seal of flame. A false flag riot, staged for effect, its brutal suppression already scripted. Blood by design. This is real, she whispered. They manufactured the rebellion. Justified the purge. Seized power. Rewrote history. Cassian didn't speak at first. He looked at her, steady as stone, the fire in him banked but burning. Not everyone looks away. Not forever. I don't need a crowd. I need a crack. One voice loud enough to echo. He stepped closer. Let the court call me mad. Let them laugh. But someone out there needs to know they weren't alone. And once it starts, he let the sentence hang. Selene turned another sheet. A blood-red handprint sealed the last page. One line scrawled beneath, let their names be broken, but their blood be watched. Selene frowned. Watched? Cassian hesitated. There's a theory. That not all purged bloodlines were meant to be eliminated. Some were. Folded into others. Hidden. Monitored. For signs of what? Legacy. Power. Magic. Her heart thudded. Before she could speak again, something shifted, not heard, but felt. A draft. A change in pressure. The stillness of the room stopped being silence and became waiting. Selene turned. A soft click echoed behind her. From the shadows, the assassins emerged like smoke. 4. No, 5. Silent, hooded, faceless. No house colors. No heraldry. But on the hilt of one blade gleamed a sigil she knew too well, a coiled serpent swallowing flame. Her breath caught. The warden's mark. Dominion authority in its purest form, the kind that never left witnesses. Ambush, she hissed. Cassian had already drawn his blade. They moved together. No elegance. No ceremony. Only blood. The first assassin lunged for Cassian, twin daggers, fast and low. Cassian blocked one, parried the second, and drove his elbow into the attacker's throat. The man stumbled, just for a breath, before Cassian's sword slid beneath his ribs and up through his heart. Selene spun as another came for her. Her dagger dropped into her hand. Steel met steel. She ducked the arc of a blade, slammed her knee into the assassin's gut, and drove her knife into his throat. Blood sprayed across her sleeve. A third came from the side, too fast to see, almost too fast to block. She turned just in time, catching the strike, reversing her grip. Pain flared across her ribs. She gritted her teeth, twisted, and drove her blade deep. The man dropped. The fourth loomed, massive, armored, wielding a blackened sword etched in embered script. Sigilled. Ancient. Forbidden. He raised it. Selene lunged, too late. Cassian thrust his blade through the assassin's heart. Stone cracked. The sigilled blade spun across the floor, screeching to a stop beneath the fresco. Selene dove. The moment her fingers closed around the hilt, her skin screamed. Heat. Magic. Pain. The weapon rejected her. She didn't let go. A hiss behind her. The last assassin, tall, gaunt, veiled, moved like smoke, twin blades flickering. Her movements were too fast, too smooth. Beautiful and deadly. Selene surged forward. Steel clashed. Sparks flew. She blocked high, ducked low, swept the woman's leg. The assassin pivoted mid-fall, slashed up, and Selene met the strike with her burning blade. Flame licked the edge of the sigil steel. Selene reversed her grip and drove the weapon home. The assassin jerked. Stilled. Fell. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. Smoke curled from the hearth. The banners hung in tatters. 5 bodies lay across the archive floor. Cassian leaned against the wall, one shoulder torn open, blood seeping down his side. His sword dangled in his grip. He was pale. Breathing hard. Alive. Selene stood in the center of the carnage, the sigil blade still in her hand. Her palm was blistered, skin blackened where it touched the hilt. The pain grounded her. kept her from shaking. She looked at Cassian. He raised his head, eyes blazing through exhaustion. "You see?" he said hoarsely. "There are no safe sides anymore." Selene wiped the blade on a tattered Dominion banner. The cloth crumbled beneath the blood. "No," she said softly. "Only choices." Their eyes met. In his, she saw not a noble, not a rebel, just a man who had already chosen ruin, and was waiting for her to do the same. Selene stepped forward. She kissed him. It wasn't soft. It wasn't sweet. It was war. Their mouths met in fury, in defiance. A vow without words. A pact sealed in blood. When they broke apart, Cassian leaned his forehead against hers, breath trembling. "This will ruin us," he said. "I know," Selene whispered. And she kissed him again.